Hey there everybody, welcome back to Fantasy Inc. My name is Wyeth, and today we're going to be doing something a little bit different, a comparison between two books, Babel, The Necessity of Violence, as well as YellowFace. These books are both written by R.F. Kuang, bestseller and award-winning author who wrote the Poppy War series. So let's jump into both of them and see what direction R.F. Kuang plans on going in. Let's do this. Babel, or The Necessity of Violence, the arcane history of the Oxford translators. My goodness, that's a mouthful. The book is about a young man who takes the name Robin Swift. I say takes the name because the young man is now an orphan who is visited by a Richard Lowell, who is a professor from the very accredited College Babel, which is in the Oxford campus. Mr. Lowell then takes the boy out of his dire circumstances, makes him choose his own English name, and then trains him to become a prodigy scholar. The young boy decides to go with the name Robin Swift due to some influences from reading as a child, and Mr. Lowell actually gets a bit of a kick out of that, and they abscond over to Britain, where the young man is raised with the best education available. I should mention that this book is based in the early 17th century, so that's something to consider because it is a historical fiction, and Miss Kuang does a remarkable job at the beginning of the book, at least for the audio version, to describe how she tried to keep it as accurate to the times as possible, but also had to take some liberties when it came to time period, some things occurring, placing some businesses on certain streets, as well as, of course, the magic system. I will say that the magic system is very light. I should probably rephrase that. The magic system is incredibly complicated, at least on my first time through rereading it, but to the point, it is taking a back seat. It is not the end-all be-all of this series. The book is mainly focused on these characters, their development, and really British colonialism and what that meant for people around the world who are having to deal with it. I did very much enjoy this book. I could not put it down. I started it right before my vacation, and during my long car ride down there, definitely finished it and instantly picked up the next book that R.F. Kuang had published earlier in this year, YellowFace. YellowFace is a book mainly following the protagonist, June Hayward, who is a young author in her late 20s who has not seen a lot of success. She's gotten one book published with very limited accolades, if any. She is really struggling, working some jobs that she's not very much enjoying, and doesn't have the best perspective on life, a little cynical. Within the first chapter, which this is not a spoiler, R.F. Kuang actually had mentioned this in an interview I'd seen her do on this book, Athena Liu, her frenemy, passes away unexpectedly, no foul play, a complete accident, but Athena Liu, who's very successful, has a finished first draft of what would have been, I should say, her magnum opus. June Hayward, in a state of desperation and fear after seeing her frenemy pass away, decides to take the book and begins to revise it as a writing exercise. But the further she gets along into the revision process, the more she feels this connection to this work. Now, to give y'all an idea of what this book within this book was about, it is about the Chinese laborers who were utilized in World War I for a lot of the construction on the North American parts of the world. Cites Canada and the US, but there were some basically atrocities done to these people, and up to this point there's been a very little information, at least in this world, published on what these people had gone through. So obviously R.F. Kuang is bringing up some issues to the forefront here about race inequality, and this is talked about by June Hayward, a Caucasian author, taking over the work of Athena Liu, who has Chinese heritage within her. Though none of these characters in this book is made out to be a good person, you get to see as the story unfolds pieces of information falling into place that gives us as readers more of an idea on who these people are and not just the images that other people perceive them to be. And it is a really great piece of work. When it comes to comparing the both of them, my God, it's like comparing apples and oranges. Yes, they're both fruit. Yes, they're talking about some really, really intense issues like race inequality in both of them. But it's gone about in such a different way with such a different perspective. Yes, they're both first person, but let's take Babel for an example. She's writing through a male protagonist's view of the world in the 17th century who has some Asian heritage. And we look at YellowFace, which she's writing through June Hayward, a Caucasian woman's perspective within the 21st century. There's going to be a lot of different themes and voices that are touched on in these works, and I have to say, truly, I enjoyed both of them so very, very much. If I had to make a choice, it'd be Babel, just for I'm a sucker for a magic system, and I have to admit, even though a lot of Babel's magic system went right over my head when it came to translations and how it was built out, you know, it was just so interesting. I've never seen anything like this magic system, and we'll definitely need to go back and read this one in a couple months just to try and get my head around it a little more. I highly recommend both of them. YellowFace is a bit of a shorter read, so if you're looking for just something you could probably get done in a weekend, if you really put your mind to it, that's the one for you, whereas Babel is something you'll really want to sit down and try to take in. And I'll leave it at that for now. If y'all have read these books, feel free to join me into the deep dive. We're going to be talking about the spoilers. If not, I really do appreciate y'all taking the time to watch this video, and to be sure to keep reading. We'll go ahead and start with Babel just because we have a lot to tackle here. Babel follows Robin Swift, who is saved from Canton by what we assume and later find out is most likely his father, Richard Lowell. He's then trained throughout the next 7 years before he goes to college to study translations. Within that time, he works very diligently after being beaten by his father quite ruthlessly, but almost, oh my goodness, it wasn't even with any anger either. It was just a lesson being taught to someone that Richard Lowell thought was lesser than him, which really kind of set the stage for the story. Once he gets there, he meets his friends, specifically who he considers his best friend, Rami, as well as Victoire and Letty, the two female students there. And as they go throughout college, we get to see brief glimpses into how each of them are struggling with the world that they are currently in. Like you have Rami and Victoire, someone of Indian heritage as well as someone who is Haitian, who have much darker skin than our main character Robin. And it's very interesting how Kuang kind of lumps the two of them together as facing really the brunt of the racism and indiscretions from the British community at that time, whereas we have Robin and Letty, who are kind of lumped together as well, since Robin is Asian, but can pass for white, and Letty is a woman, so they are treated a little bit better, but still go through their own difficulties with the culture of the time within academia. I thought that was a great way to show different sides of the struggles that different peoples may have gone through during that time. As we get further into the story, Robin's half-brother appears as the high-up member of an organization trying to take down the British Empire, and the way he sees to do it is by taking down the College of Babel, or at least altering history at these critical points which the organization determines might actually affect how future generations live their lives. Robin, opposed to Griffin, is definitely much more comfortable within his current life. He sees the injustices that the countries around the world are definitely dealing with, whether it's between, the power of trade, which the British government has in large supply, or just the power of armed forces. But at the same time, he has become so comfortable and cultivated to some point to become a British citizen, that he's definitely flip-flopping between his ideals, and we get to have a really good perspective of his mindset. Once Robin gets to see the actual indiscretions going on when he revisits his homeland almost a decade later in Canton and sees that his people are being just trampled upon and being forced to utilize opium, he decides to do something a little bit drastic in the moment. May have been an accident, but he kills Richard Lowell, and he, as well as his friends, have to cover up the murder. Once they return, they can't keep the lid on it forever, and they have to flee back to the alternative organization trying to take down Babel's Institute. Betrayals happen, people die, and Robin now becomes the person that he viewed his brother of being. And he realizes that if you want to have the top dog sit down with you at the table and be on equal footing, you need to have the carrot as well as the stick, which they definitely do once they take over the College of Babel. All in all, this story was phenomenal. I really did enjoy the magic system, even though it went over my head. R.F. Kuang gave us a lot of information when it came to the actual translations from different languages, which was incredibly appreciated, and I loved this book. YellowFace, on the other hand, takes some of these similar issues, but goes in a completely different direction. Our main character, June Hayward, like I mentioned in the synopsis, sees her friend / enemy, Athena Liu, die in the first chapter from a pancake eating contest, which is kind of a sad way to go out, if I had to say so myself. There on the table, she sees the finished first draft of the Chinese labor stories about World War I, and she decides to, in a split-second decision, take the work and claim it as her own. R.F. Kuang does a really good way of justifying June Hayward's actions. I get halfway into the book, and I'm still thinking like, oh my goodness, I can completely see how someone like this has, made a few small wrong steps in this direction and it just takes her down a path that, she didn't want to be on. She has to kind of pay the piper, but at the same time, she's going to appreciate the pros of her situation. I can completely understand that. And then she just keeps going further down this rabbit hole, and we see in the latter half of the books that, oh no, this is whether she was always this person or whether she became this person and just got worse at justifying herself. She is very cynical and narcissistic. And I'd like to relate it to something similar to Breaking Bad, where you have a good character at the beginning, and throughout the story, throughout these wrong steps they're making, they become a bad person at the end of it. Though, after finishing the book and looking back, June Hayward just might be Tony Soprano the whole time. All in all, YellowFace is a satire on the publishing industry, as well as a really meta glimpse into social media, specifically Twitter. I saw that when I was re-reviewing it on Wiki once I had finished the book early on my vacation. I thought that was a very apt description of what R.F. Kuang was trying to discuss here. Obviously, R.F. Kuang's voice is coming through a lot more strongly in YellowFace than any of her other works that I've currently seen, and that's because it's much more realistic to what I imagine her life situation is about. It's about the publishing industry, and she's a published author. So we have to take that into account. Other authors I know have discussed, a little bit of themselves goes into each character. It's completely impossible, from my knowledge, to write a character that you have nothing in common with. But it just feels like this is much more realistic to her day-to-day life compared to the other stories. And I think we get to see a split of her personality between Athena Liu and June Hayward in this. All in all, both these books are tackling some really, really impressive as well as controversial themes, and I have nothing but respect for Miss Kuang. She is such a young writer, and I know for a fact she's got so many other great books and stories yet to tell. Whether she may know them or not, I've just got that much faith in her, and I do recommend, if y'all haven't picked at least Babel up in a while, you go back and reread it, because it is worth it. When it comes to comparison, My personal preference is Babel, but I have a lot of respect for what Miss Kuang did with YellowFace. It definitely made me, as a reader, think a lot more about perception as well as how to navigate on the internet in this modern day and age. You never know who's reading your works, you never know what their opinions are, but after reading YellowFace, I think if it's not a positive comment, then I will not be responding to it. At least that's the motto for this channel in the near future. Though I do appreciate everyone's really candid observations, and I'm not putting down anyone who might have a negative comment in the future. I really do appreciate those who are candid with their beliefs and encourage y'all to give your honest beliefs on my reviews in general. At the end of the day, though, you can't be bogged down with the hate. All of my viewers have been nothing but fantastic, but you know, you never know if this channel blows up, and I sure hope it does, but at the end of the day, it's what I will be going with as a motto. All in all, off my little soapbox there, I do appreciate everyone's time. I hope all of y'all have an absolutely fantastic rest of your day. Be sure to pick these ones back on up and keep reading.